So, welcome to Catching Up with Claudia. Now, ojalá que se puedan quedar hasta el final para que puedan escuchar lo que va a compartir mi invitada o mi invitado. Así es que no se les olvide también de seguirnos por las redes sociales. Estamos en todas las plataformas. Hasta luego. Hi there, es la Supercomadre Claudia de RadioCristalUSA.com. So we're going to be catching up with Claudia a little bit different today, but I wanted to share with you this valuable resource that we're going to show you today, and it has to do with perimenopause and menopause. Yes, because La Supercomadre is in her hot flash era and her menopause era. And I also wear different hats. My other hat is that I work for the Hackett Center for Mental Health, and they have this valuable resource, a webinar where they brought together some amazing speakers, doctors in the field, researchers in the field of perimenopause and menopause. So, woo! Menopause has hit me, and you know what? If there's a woman in your life, or you are a woman, it might hit you. It might not, because it affects us all differently. But I'd like for you to connect with this webinar and take away some valuable research, information, resources to help you navigate this stage in your life. If you're in it, or maybe you know someone that is, or just be ready. And when you come across this stage in your life, or this stage in your life comes across you. All right. So enjoy the webinar.
Wow. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 5th webinar in our series of With Women in Mind. Today's session focuses on an essential yet often overlooked topic, understanding perimenopause and menopause on our women's health and well-being. It's such a privilege to have you all here today as we delve into a topic that affects millions of women worldwide. Perimenopause is a unique period that's characterized by menopausal physical changes that can coincide with midlife stressors, health conditions associated with aging, and individual psychosocial risk factors that then contribute to the increased risk for mood and anxiety disorders. Our discussion here today is rooted in the recognition that while perimenopause and menopause are part of a natural phase in our lives as women, that these physical changes can have profound emotional and behavioral health, and that these experiences deserve our attention, understanding. Today's session highlights the importance of normalizing these experiences and offering support during this pivotal time. Let me just share a few statistics with you all. In the United States, more than 1.3 women enter menopause each year. And let me just say that again, each year. Yet many of us lack access to accurate information, support, and treatment options. In a 2022 survey, it revealed that 73% of women felt unprepared for the changes they experienced during perimenopause, including the hot flashes, mood swings, and brain fog. Behavioral health challenges are also a more significant concern during this time. Studies show that women in perimenopause are 2 to 4 times more likely to experience symptoms of depression than at any other time in their lives. These statistics emphasize the need for an open conversation and better resources for women navigating these challenges. And today, we are fortunate to have an outstanding panel of experts who will share their insights, break down the myths, and offer actionable advice on thriving during perimenopause and menopause. If you'll join me in welcoming our panelists today. If our panelists will join, we have Dr. Roxanne Perot, and we have Drs. Nelson and Dr. Z joining us today. And I hear, let's see, that the volume is low, so I'm going to come a little closer and hopefully that helps. I forget that I can be soft-spoken at times. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And we see that 2 of you have joined us from the same room. So thank you. We are delighted to have you. So let's just start off really briefly with an introduction so that our audience knows how fortunate we are to have your perspectives with us today. How about we kick it off with Dr. Z?
Well, thank you. Yes, we had a university computer glitch. That's why I apologize. Thanks to Dr. Nelson here. I'm Dr. Paul Zaretsky. I started my career as an OBGYN, and at that time, back in the 70s, it was the start of a new field called reproductive endocrinology. And we started in sperm and eggs and did things related to in vitro fertilization. And the one area that we didn't pay much attention to, but my mentors kept telling me, you'll be sorry you didn't, was the menopause. And so for the last decade or two, particularly with the North American Menopause Society, we've seen some very big changes in terms of how we're approaching things. And I think what I would like to bring up today is all the different issues related to the menopause and the fact that they've all been compartmentalized. And unfortunately, that has really led to a lot of misinformation and confusion. We'll talk about that a little bit later in terms of the process. So I think it's a perfect time right now for us all to come together and start talking about the future of menopause care, how we're going to deal with it in a more holistic manner. I think that's the really important piece. We really haven't done much nationwide. There are very few centers for menopause. When I was at Baylor a few years ago, we tried to set up a center, but it just hasn't got the impetus. And for some reason, I don't understand administratively how that's happened. So once again, I think we have an opportunity now to really move forward in this field.
Thank you, Dr. Z, and we're grateful to have you. Dr. Z, did you share a little bit about how you, I guess, maybe some of the unique perspective that you're going to offer for us today?
Yeah, I think the big area, some of the new advances that we're seeing from the bowel and the microbiome, for the role of AI in empowering patients to start making decisions. I think those are the 2 big areas we're going to talk about from my end. And this whole holistic approach where we stop compartmentalizing, so only the OBGYNs talk about vaginal issues and only the cardiologists talk about the heart. That's what we're seeing at the national level. We're all beginning to sit down and say, whoa, the brain actually has issues related to estrogen. So does the heart. The more we start looking at the individual pieces coming together, the more chance we have treating the patient as a whole.
That's fantastic. And I'm excited to hear all the things that you have to share with us today. Dr. Nelson.
So I'm a psychologist, and my passion was one of the things you asked about for us to talk about. And I can say my passion probably goes back from my days as a Peace Corps volunteer when I really loved the idea of trying to engage with people that didn't have information and offering creative ways to reach people out in communities that aren't being served, communities that don't have access to what we think is sort of everyone should have with information. And I think that in particular, this topic is one where it is a drought of information for everyone. And that there's so much misinformation and a lot of sort of cultural myths out there about what it means to be growing older as a woman and all the horrible things that are going to happen to us, and that, we're no longer worth anything and we're going to turn up into dried ferns and be miserable people. And, and with all that comes a lot of fear of going through these natural, beautiful processes of aging. And rather than embracing that and celebrating some of these milestones in our lives, we're terrified. And so much of that is based in just lack of information for people, lack of services for people. And, I think, it's such a need to start to address some of these things. And so I think it's great that you guys are having this webinar, and I think there's so much more that we can be doing in this area.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. A short story, a friend of mine who's already been through menopause was telling me that when she was going through the perimenopausal period and went to her doctor about some of the challenges that she was having, the brain fog, kind of the mood. And he just told her, you know what? Your body was designed to deal with this, and basically good luck. I mean, so I can resonate. I'm sure there's a lot of women who can resonate with your perspective, and we're excited to dig deeper in the conversation today. Dr. Perot, please share a little bit about yourself and what your passion is and the lens that you offer to our audience today.
Yes, thank you again for having me and for being on this panel. Very nice to meet you both, Dr. Z and Dr. Nelson. I am a trained OBGYN with, I think, my own personal struggles in my late 30s with trying to achieve fertility. I moved on from a more solely conventional approach to practicing women's health and really delved into holistic integrative interventions. I'm board certified through the American College of Lifestyle Medicine as well as the Institute of Functional Medicine. And I just, again, with my experience with infertility going into my 40s, just realizing that I didn't want the experience that I had with infertility to be the experience that I had with perimenopause. And so what I kind of bring for my patients is, I think that empathetic lens of I'm going through the same thing that you're going through. I understand that you've maybe have some fear around discussing your symptoms with your doctor, some mistrust about, whether or not you're going to get all of the information and all of the different options that are at your disposal. And educating is huge too. I think, just again, the increased risk of depression, brain fog, you no longer feel like yourself in your own body, and removing that fear and saying it's not your fault. So many changes are happening, so let me educate you about it, and then really give you the opportunity to empower with all of the different options that we can use to manage perimenopause and menopause.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, Dr. Perot, since we ended with you, I'm going to start with you. We heard, I think, from each of you that there's this misunderstanding, right? Even when I opened up that there's misperceptions, misunderstanding. And I think, among patients, but also, amongst physicians. And so what would you say are maybe some of the common misperceptions that folks have about menopause and perimenopause, and then what can be done?
Yeah, I think the common misconceptions is that it's an old person issue, that, if you feel good and look good as the same as you did in your 30s and you're entering your 40s, that's not something that you have to worry about or think about. But you start to have just those little symptoms that creep in that are likely related to perimenopause. You go in a room, you forget what you went in there for. You're starting to have more weight gain despite not changing anything about your diet or your exercise routine. Your partner is, ticking you off a lot more than they normally would. And so really listening to your body is going to that process of, it's a long transition that for some people happens, gradually, other people it happens pretty abruptly. But I think that is a common misconception that, it's our grandmother's thing to deal with and not ours. But I personally love the time that I'm going through perimenopause right now because it's actually being talked about. It's all over the place in social media and in such a positive light. And I love that we're really making it like, hey, this is the cool kids thing to do, is to learn about perimenopause for yourself, so that it's not something that you have to loathe and be ashamed about too, you know, to be able to say that you're having a hot flash and that's okay in the workspace, and that people kind of don't look at you like you're the old lady in the office kind of a thing. So
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Nelson and Dr. Z, same question to you guys. What do you think are the most misunderstood aspects of perimenopause and menopause? And then, what are the things that you're thinking from the physician in our trainings? Why is it that physicians aren't really talking or addressing it, about this? I know certainly my own physician didn't, to your point, Dr. Perot, give me heads up, have conversations about it at other, life, periods of time in my life. The physicians always sort of address this or talk about it. But this seems to be something that it's really us as women are having to bring to our doctors and are having to say, I'm having challenges, and are not given a lot of support even in the preparation period of time. So I'd love to hear what our other two panelists think about this.
I think that, thank you, Dr. Pro, it's what happened in my generation. Menopause was thought of as a hot flash. And all the stuff that we're beginning to talk about now, the cognitive function changes, the cardiovascular, those were never really discussed. So it led to a very simplistic, oh, you got hot flashes. And even that was a myth, because everybody's like, oh, we're going to go through them. But you don't necessarily go through them. They could go 7 to 10 years. And so that became a thing. And then the Women's Health Initiative in the 90s came out and said, oh my God, estrogen is a problem because all these problems. Well, then that data got rethought. So that's still pervading the medical community. I see so many doctors still say, oh, I can't give estrogens because they're going to give heart attacks and all that. And so women are out there with, oh my God, estrogen is a big problem for me. I can't do that. So that's another myth. And then you layer that with the whole idea that everyone around them has no idea. Partners. When they come in, it's like, oh, well, she's going to get through this. They don't realize that it's an aging process, that there are things that can help. You don't necessarily have to use estrogen. There are new agents now that are great for dealing with vasomotor symptoms. And then you throw in the discussion of sexuality, it goes crazy because their lack of information and the ability to share the information and the closed-mindedness of physicians that I think we've got also not only educating the community, we as doctors have to educate ourselves. I see that happening in the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. We really are getting sessions that are sitting us down. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we'll get off in a second, I'm shocked at the role of all these endocrine disruptors now, the phthalates, the stuff that's out in the community. We never thought that disrupts sleep. Now, all of a sudden, women that are having hot flashes and sleep problems, guess what? They have phthalate levels that are incredibly higher than women in the menopause that don't have. Yeah.
Oh, my God. Well, I think part of where my head goes is that so often, I love that, like in your organization, you guys are doing this and you're talking about it. And maybe there's some other little group of psychologists that are talking about this. And there's some functional med people that are really into this and really getting this now. And the primary care physicians, where are they, right? Because where is everybody going? I know for me, mental health, the majority of people going in for mental health concerns are going to their primary care physicians. And so I think in my world, there's our key, is integrating with our primary care physicians and finding ways to ensure that they have the information and the resources that they need to be able to reach out to the resources that can help with all of this, and finding better ways to create pathways of communication between physicians, between behavioral health providers, so that when somebody's coming in for help, they're not just going to see this one person that may or may not have that information, but they have a network of people that are there to be able to help them. And I think in terms of behavioral health, so much of the mood piece that gets dismissed or missed going on during these years is part of the big problem there, that people, say, oh, you'll be fine, pat you on the head. You're just, having a little bit of problems, your hormones are acting up or whatever, rather than taking the time to assess that. How much is it impacting people? How much are we struggling with these new issues? And is it something that we need to address? And, you know, people don't want to ask those questions. People don't want to ask questions about their sex lives. You know, when you're going in to see your physician, they're not always asking, hey, how's your sex life right now? Are you feeling like it's satisfactory? Is your partner happy? If your partner, you know, like, is that working out for you now or not? And because there are big changes happening there. And is anyone willing to talk about that and have those conversations? Because then that impacts that whole person. You know, when things aren't going good at home and the relationship's not going right and the pressures are there, and, you know, there are all these things that sort of start piling up. And then that's going to impact the mood stuff even more. And there's part of that problem. If we're not addressing each of these things and recognizing that, again, this is all just part of change in life, address it openly and talk about it being, this is naturally what happens. And we have some great answers for how to cope with this and how to deal with this and how to address any problems you're having with this. But those conversations have to happen. And, you know, I think in terms of educating physicians moving forward, you know, I know that here we're working hard to try and make sure that some of the stuff gets incorporated somewhere in our student doctors so that they're learning these things. Because I think that that's the important part of the future, is that as physicians are coming out of schools, that they have those kinds of tools and the information they need to be able to pass it on to their patients.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the Hackett Center, we host a roundtable where we have a variety of different professionals who are interested in supporting women's health, and particularly behavioral health, women's behavioral health. And out of that has come a need. I mean, there is a common theme that seems to be resonating with a lot of people, that, you know, physicians and practitioners just don't know enough, that there has to be more training around women's health. And then again, more specifically, women's behavioral health. And so it's not that, you know, for the audience, that physicians are the physician that you're going to who perhaps wasn't, you know, able to address your need, or like told my friend, well, this is just something you have to deal with. It's not, you know, from a malintent, right? It's a lack of education and training. I certainly didn't learn anything about this when I went to medical school. So, and so there does seem to be a need for this more education, more training of the physician and clinician community. And that's something that we're trying to work on and form partnerships around. I guess I'd be interested, Dr. Perot, you know, I do now follow you on Instagram, and you are leveraging social media to get the word out and to educate. And it seems like you've really taken the charge in trying to educate the public. Maybe can you just talk a little bit about that and things that you feel like that the message that you're trying to convey to the public and broader audience?
Yeah, I think, you know, for better or for worse, I think humility and empathy is something that's a requirement when you're a medical doctor. And I got to the point in my private practice that I had to practice a lot of humility, because I really didn't know how to talk to women about perimenopause and menopause. And, you know, yeah, just, you know, to Dr. Nelson's point, we're not educated on it. And unfortunately, most doctors or providers like your friend, they'll just say, hey, you know, you just have to get through it, or, hey, I just have this one option. And I just really felt the need, I think, especially for, you know, many of the women that I see, women of color, to put information out there that, since now, I mean, transitioning from conventional to, I've gone to just only a cash-based practice, where I know that some of my former patients aren't able to follow me. And so I felt that it was important to put information out there that they could still have access to me, and what I could provide, after I went through my own personal training to gain the knowledge to help women through perimenopause and menopause. So, but again, like I said, I try to make it real, don't just try to change your hair color when it goes gray, don't go and get Botox for the wrinkles. Also do the work on the inside, know that perimenopause and menopause can change your cholesterol levels, can change your risk of dementia, can change your body fat composition, and really get educated about those more important things that matter than the physical appearance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. There's a great comment in the chat around us being our own agents of health. And I think, for those of us who, like us on the panel or many of you in the audience, we do have that feeling of like, well, if you're not going to give me an answer, I'm going to go to someone else and I'm going to keep searching and researching and trying to advocate. But, the reality is, ideally we'd like to work toward a system that is not that hard, right? That
Absolutely.
we can go to a physician and they're fully educated and fully equipped to give us everything we need. But that will take some time. And so I guess for Dr. Nelson and Dr. Z, what would you say? Like, what are questions that women should be asking their doctors? What are things that they should be saying so they can become their own advocate?
Well, I want to thank Dr. Pearl first for the concept of getting it out there, because we've got to get patient-centric care. And I get passionate over the world. I'm an old guy. But AI gives the opportunity for somebody to think, who am I? Now, my wife just went through this experience with her person telling her they're going to treat her lab tests. Okay, this is what her cholesterol is. And she went through them with good knowledge. She's a nurse practitioner. She found out, I don't need this. I don't have any of the other parameters. Yet that doctor was fixated on the fact that this is what has to be treated. And I see that so much among my colleagues. We were trained, and there's no guilt here or fault, but we were trained to look at lab value. We're related to that. This is an opportunity now, and I think it's coming through Instagram communication with patients. Hey, you can't sleep. Oh, there could be phytotoxins. There could be issues related to your biome. There could be other things out there. And this is the exciting time, I think, in history for the menopause patient to be able to start asking these questions. What do they need to ask? They need to ask what they need to ask. I am concerned about this. And don't take no for an answer. Don't take, oh, well, just take this medicine, you'll sleep better. Maybe it isn't just the sleep. It could be that your thyroid levels are messed up. You're getting thyroid antibodies. I've seen so many patients with thyroid antibody issues that are ignored because the healthcare industry says, oh, you do a thyroid level, that's a TSH. That's it. And if that's normal, you're normal. You're not. And those are the kind of things that patients say, well, if that lab test is there, and get on the internet, get on AI source and ask, I have this TSH, what else should I do? It's not perfect, but it creates a new foundation.
And I think that having access to that information is so important. And I work with women that, they've gone somewhere and somebody said, well, take this or take that or take this, take that. And the next thing they know, they've got this huge concoction of all kinds of things, and they're feeling worse. They actually listened to the professionals that they were going, and they thought they were doing everything right. And now they're, overwhelmed, anxious, depressed, miserable, and they don't understand why. And so now they fail, right? And you just pile that failure on top. And, so having, I think part of our role is to ensure that we are constantly empowering people to ask questions, ask, go get more information. Just because I have my degree does not mean that I know everything, nor does it mean that I have all the answers. And it's okay if you're not happy with what I'm saying to say, wait, that's not going to work for me. What else can we do? Or this isn't
clap for you.
And we have to let people know that that's okay. That it's okay to challenge us. And there are certainly times when I need to be challenged, and that's good. That's what I would want everyone to do all the time. And that's how you take care of yourself. And yeah.
So Dr. Nelson, I think Dr. Perot was cheering you on, and Dr. Perot, you froze.
I froze for a second.
But I think we all got the positive vibes.
I wish I could extract that last part that you said, and just post it everywhere, because it was just perfect, just having that humility to say, I don't know, but I want you to get answers. I want you to feel better. So let's get you to someone who does, Yeah.
But I'm going to go down another avenue here, because what I'm hearing is there's all this stuff out there, and we're just talking about the patient, but we as a society are affected. That you've got the interpersonal issues, you got the metabolic issues of the woman. What's it costing her and her relationships? What's happening to partners? And even worse, if there are any business people out there listening, it's costing you a fortune. Because women with hot flashes don't go to work as much. They can't think as well. The cognitive changes are there. But, partnering with brain health by industry would be massive if we could do that in today's world, to be able to say, let's fix this. Let's address this. But we're not. We're putting our heads in the sand in industry. Oh, well, that's a menopause woman. She's going to get over this. How about the cognitive changes, the heart changes, the insulin resistance, the obesity? Look at Ozempic out there right now. How much of the Ozempic issue is really a menopause-related insulin receptor problem? Probably a lot.
I know. Can we imagine a world where our health system was fully integrated and we were treated as whole, complex beings who had a mental, emotional, spiritual, physical component? And I mean, that would totally change all of our training, because, in traditional allopathic medicine, that's not how we're trained, right? To think about those things. And, in the way that we currently have our systems built, our mental health care system is completely separate from our physical. I mean, even the fact that I have to use those words, mental and physical, right?
There's the problem.
It's a problem, right? That we should be thinking about individuals and people holistically. And I love this language, Dr. Z, that you talk about brain health. It's something that we use quite a bit in our work, because we want to address, right, the human functioning, and that, our mental health and well-being is such an important part of that. And it's so interconnected to all of these hormone changes and relational changes and all of these other aspects of being a human being. So I know that you, Dr. Nelson and Dr. Z, are doing some exciting work as you are trying to create a brave new world around more holistic healthcare. And Dr. Perot, the functional medicine, I have so much respect for functional medicine. And if I were ever to go back into medicine, that's additional training that I would want, because it does address this holistic nature. And that's really where, we have so many gaps. So I want to recap for our audience around kind of things that I heard you say. And it was interesting because, I'm part of this physician group online, Facebook group. Dr. Perot, you might be part of it. You guys, it's for women. Sorry, Dr. Z, but it's a physician women group. And often, right, we get memes that we post on there, like Google does not equal MD. Right. And we have lots of, our peers posting around how annoyed they are at patients who are researching and Googling and then coming into their office, armed with all this information. So what's the balance, right? Like, for our audience, what sources or should we fully trust AI now and ChatGPT to be given patients information? I just saw a posting for the FDA that maybe, AI might be able to make health recommendations in the future. So I guess maybe give us some balance here, because as I hear you saying this, I think I'm hearing all the physicians in my network who are saying, no, we don't want these patients coming in with their textbooks and with their Google printouts. So help the audience navigate this a little bit. What's the balance between being your own advocate and then also really recognizing that physicians do spend a lot of time in their school and their education and their training marketing and psychologists and mental health professionals. So what's this perfect balance that we can find?
You guys want to go?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Bro.
I personally love when patients bring in information. I think that I've learned more than one thing from patients through their fervent research. But I think that where it needs to kind of be defined is that it is information, but it's not personalized to you. So let's review this information together, and then let's talk about how this is applicable to you moving forward or not. But I think that it is something I always cringe when I Google does not equal MD, because if you're not proven, they're going to be Googling. So you decide if you're going to go and do the work and do the research, and then give that information to patients in a way that they can digest it, or you be okay with them bringing in Google information.
I love that, Dr. Pro. I mean, I think if nothing else, bringing in information gives you an opportunity to have a discussion. And so, having that conversation is so important, and people feel more engaged in their healthcare if they're part of that process. So it's no longer the expert telling you what the answer is. Now you're a part of that whole process, and you can have ownership in what we're talking about. So if I own part of that process, I'm more engaged in that. I'm likely to be more compliant. I'm likely to get more excited about whatever we decide makes the most sense. There's that patient-centered care that we talk about. It's allowing for patients to bring in information and to question things and to engage in those conversations. And, I think it's great. Is there misinformation? Absolutely there is. And that's part of that conversation. Is it personalized? No, it's not. And so it may have, what I find on Google may have absolutely nothing to do with what's going on with me, but that's okay, because it opens a door for us to talk about.
I'm going to play somewhat devil's advocate here. If I was in the audience, I'd be hearing and preaching to the choir. Okay, so the question I would have in trying to reach this balance is, what do you do with physicians? What do you do with providers? What do we do as an industry to get them educated? I've seen in our society pushback from OBGYNs here, and one of the big advances is getting into the vendor areas, getting people there that are selling lubricant, vaginal lubricants, starting to deal with things. And like, oh my God, that was 5 years ago, impossible. Now somebody says, well, why are you doing that? And then now you could have a patient educator say, well, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Current urinary tract infections happen because there's a low estrogen on the outside. And it's baby steps at this point. You can't just expect by going in and giving the information. There's going to be pushback by the physician. So I think, partially have to be careful about preaching to the choir about that. And maybe the audience can hear what I'm saying is step back a second and do things that will be productive. So you can say, well, I always taught my kids, rather than tell somebody something, ask them a question. So I'm thinking about the role of diet. Do you think diet has any role? The doctor goes, no. The Columbo thing when I was younger, teacher, well, I just read about this, and this might actually help. And, you might even send the doctor an email on that, and he might actually read it if it's not a threat in terms of treatment.
Thank you. So we're going to pivot a little bit because I'm loving the discussion, but we want to leave with some solutions, right, to let folks know. So I'd love for each of our panelists maybe to highlight things that you professionally are doing, opportunities, new advancements, anything that gives us some sense of okay, we've talked about the challenges. Now, what's the answer? One thing that I've heard is the education of physicians, and that is something that our organization has committed to take on. So we're working on that and would love to collaborate with you all or, with members of our audience to make that happen. But in addition to that, as a potential solution, what are some some other things that are happening, whether it be new research, whether it be, I know you all are doing exciting things at Sam Houston, if you want to talk about that work, but what's happening so folks know that there is some movement and progress in this area?
Well, I'll just hop in real quick. I know I get excited about the idea of integrated sort of clinics and primary care that's partnered with behavioral health professionals, and that's becoming more of a trend and more common, and really, I know from the psychologist perspective, is a really important movement. You know, for us to get out of our own little offices somewhere, you know, in a whole different building, and actually join in with primary care physicians and be part of that practice. And I'm lucky enough here, we have a clinic that's with our faculty, and we have a clinic like that, and I get to work with the physicians, and it's wonderful. You know, when patients are struggling with things and I'm working directly with the physician and we're able to talk about things, the patient knows that they have this care team that's working for them. They love that. And, you know, and they feel like they're being taken care of as a whole person. And I think that we're going to see more and more of that, hopefully, as, you know, people recognize the value in that and really putting that whole person piece together. So I think that that's an important movement that's happening, you know, from my perspective. And I think the AI piece is huge, but I might let Dr. Z talk about that because that's his thing. He's pretty passionate about that. But I do think that's a huge part of where we're headed to.
I guess it's back to me.
If you want.
Yeah, sure. The positive and what's out there. There's a movement beginning. And anytime there's a movement, it's going to become defining those pieces. And I think you did a great job mentioning that. The AI piece, the education, and then we've kind of beaten that a good bit today, so I'm not going to add any Karen on that. I think that's there. But I think the research areas, we've got to open up our thinking to the microbiome. This has really dramatically changed the concept of the world. And when I was trained, the GI was a system and that was it. Now it's all of a sudden, oh my gosh, the kind of bacteria you have make chemicals. These chemicals change the permeability. We never thought about estrogen being metabolized from cholesterol and changing. We never thought of proteins in the gut that get to the bone that kill the bone off that we used to thought was because you had low estrogen, so you give more estrogen. And that type thinking process, industry needs to realize and help in this process to say, you know what, we're a pharmaceutical company, we're making this, we're a supplement company doing this. And that's where a marriage of research with industry would dramatically help the educational arm, which we're lacking. You know, we don't have industry engaged in this. And that's why I mentioned earlier about the cost of the industry. I think if we could get industry educated to the fact that this is costing them, and not only at the personal level, but at the financial level. If you're a business, you know, that's an important point. And here would be a great idea. All of the issues, I mean, I just pulled up a thing on the EPA's concern. These endotoxins, these endocrine disruptive chemicals that are out there, we think of them as air, but it's the food, it's the pans we use. It's getting industry, again, in research. If I'm making Teflon pans, you know what? Or I'm making red dye number X and the United States is still using it. Yeah, how can we educate the industry piece to help us improve the wellness of our menopause patients?
Thank you, Dr. C. Dr. Perot, I'm gonna customize that a little bit for you. And that, you know, specifically, what are the options out there? I mean, I think I started this saying that for many of us, when we go to our doctor, the doctor tells us there's nothing that we could do. And even when we start experiencing mood disorders or challenges, they tell us, well, it's just a period of time, right? It's just, you know, it's normal to feel, you know, crazy, right? It's normal to feel disruptive, you know, cognitively having challenges. Like, are there available treatments to help women during this period of time?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love about, you know, the space that I'm in is that I actually have 45 minutes to an hour to talk to my clients about all of the options that are available and the pros and cons. And so, and I take, a very comprehensive approach. I work with a health coach and a nutritionist, and we make sure that patients understand, hey, these are things that you can very much control that can significantly improve the symptoms that you're having from perimenopause and menopause, and how to go about making that frictionless and habit forming in their lives as far as nutrition, sleep optimization, stress management, interpersonal how personalized can we get this? How specific can we get those key points for you to optimize? And then what additionally comes with that, augmentation, what is hormone replacement therapy? What exactly how does that apply to me? Am I a good candidate for it? What are the risks and benefits? And if that's not something that patients want to entertain, at least at that point, what are some non-hormonal therapies that can be done for them, supplement wise, or, in the tech space wise, for instance, for me, I'm 45, I'm not ready to start estrogen therapy. I love my progesterone for sleep, but even still, I am waking up with hot flashes. And so I found this amazing watch called an Ember watch. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it for 7 to 9 hours, it will send pulses of cooling on your wrist. And I've gotten the best sleep of my life. I'm so thankful that I was able to find it. And so just realizing that there is so much out there right now, which is amazing to have at your disposal to help with those symptoms. You don't have to suffer alone. And, I would really push for, just like, we're looking to have providers get more educated, insurance needs to get on board. Our clinic provides super bills and CPT codes to help patients get reimbursed through their insurance. But gosh, it would be great if they would just make that a lot easier for patients to get reimbursed when they're going out of network, to really get these personalized plans that are going to ultimately improve their morbidity and mortality in the future.
And Dr. Perot, what is the name of this watch again?
It's EMBR. Ember.
EMBR. Okay.
EMBR.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you, Carla.
Yeah, there you go. They linked it.
Yeah, perfect. That's fabulous. Let me ask you, and this is a follow-up question from the chat. Is there information for women to read or listen to regarding how these medications interact and how they can mess with your mood, your weight, et cetera? So for instance, Dr. Perot, when you, not everyone may be able to afford out of network or
right.
only physicians who can spend 45 minutes with them, right? And so back to our original idea that patients should be trying to get as much information as they can, so then they come in. So are there resources, and Dr. Z and Dr. Nelson, I'll have you chime in after Dr. Perot, but how do women find out what the available treatment options are, and what are some good sources that help them understand, well, what's the risk? If a woman's, considering HRT or, pellets, testosterone, or where do they go for this information besides Chat GPT, Dr. Z, which I know?
Yeah, I think it's great that we're having so many medical doctors writing informational books on this. I think in the last year, there's been, at least 3 really great ones. Dr. Haber has been leading the charge on, she has the new Menopause book. Jessica Shepard has Generation M. I think it's Dr. Dr. Malone has Grown Women Talk. So that is where I would really push patients to start with. If they can give show a doctor a book that was written by an MD, I think that, unfortunately, most doctors trust MDs, even if they know nothing about them. But those are three really, really great resources for patients to start with. And they can learn, just in layman's term, the pros and cons of HRT versus supplements versus lifestyle changes.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And Carla already has dropped in the chat Dr. Sharon Malone's book and Dr. Shepard's. And what was the third book?
The New Menopause by Dr. Haver.
Oh, by Dr. Haver. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I think someone just recommended to me Dr. Malone's book. So I look forward.
Yeah, it's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Additional resources, Dr. Z or Dr. Nelson?
Yeah, I would definitely drop into the used to be called the North American Menopause Society, and I just looked it up now. The site connection is menopause.org. This is an international group that has done an amazing job bringing definition to the areas. They're the ones who put out statements saying, this is the information. So if I was a patient and I went on the Menopause Society and asked about other treatments for my hot flashes, you'll get a strong reference source. And again, sharing those with your physician will be good. The other group is American Society for Reproductive Medicine, ASRM.org. We've begun to look there into the menopause issues, and we're focused more on the endocrine disruptor agents and things related to the environment that may be impacting on reproductive health, which now is being translated into the perimenopause as well. So I think those should be added to the educational group for patients.
Thank you. Do you have additional ones to add, Dr. Nelson?
Well, I think the one that I probably go to is the best one is the American Psychological Association, and they do have on their webpage a lot of good educational information about all kinds of topics with mental health and providers and how to find things and, when to be worried. And so that's a great resource for all topics mental health.
Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Z, you mentioned earlier around employers and how employers should really understand that it benefits them financially to support women during this time. And then, Dr. Perot, you highlighted the need for insurers, and most people have employer-based insurance. I went to a healthcare conference recently here in Houston that was comprised of a lot of the big name employers, and it was focused around women's health. And it was interesting. I found out that many of these employers have started to cover, as part of their health plans, fertility treatments. And I was surprised, because you would think, is that a good business idea for a lot of your workforce to go on maternity leave? Like, that didn't really make a lot of sense to me. But then as I was talking to the employers, they said, no, you don't understand. Like, women, to your point, Dr. Perot, are waiting later in life, later in their career to have children. And so IVF and fertility treatment is going to be a part of their life. And the choice is whether they pay for it out of pocket, which then usually results in multiples, right? Twin or triplets, which then costs the insurance and the employer millions of dollars, or the employer can just pay for it at $20,000, $30,000, and then they implant only one embryo. I think the statistic they gave me decreased the risk of multiples by 60 or 65%. So the employer and the insurer are saying, we're saving money by supporting women to have children, right? Which, again, I was like, was not a logical train of thought for me. And so I do think that there's this opportunity now to engage employers around this conversation and around how it really does make sense for them to, have, HR to cover some of these treatments I know the pellet is not covered by insurance, which for those you don't know, is like a slow release testosterone for women who are experiencing low testosterone during this period of time. There's other treatments that are not being covered by insurance. And so I absolutely think that we have an opportunity to engage employers and insurers around covering these things, right? Because it does save them money and a reduction in missed work days. And also, frankly, I don't know if you guys saw, women kind of during this period of time are making the choice to leave and start their own companies and do other things because the traditional workplace is not working out for them and not supporting them during this period of time. So we are going to post on social media, but we recently got a partnership with BP to co-host and to co-sponsor these webinars. So again, I do think that there are seeds of hope that we can make some traction with industry. So we're very excited about that. So again, this time is just going by so fast. I know some of you in the audience have already been dropping in your questions in the chat, but we will end in about 15 minutes or so. And so if you are having burning questions that you want to ask these panelists, please make sure that you're dropping them in the chat so that I can make sure to ask them before all of our time is up. So I guess maybe a final question. Let's leave our audience with some practical tips. So what are some things that women should be thinking about or should be recognizing? Like I'll give, in these webinars, for those of you who this is your first time joining us, we really try to use this webinar as a platform to engage with experts, but also to have someone with lived experience, because I think that it's so important. And I think all of you highlighted this, that, physicians and clinicians are able to do their jobs better when they understand the patient perspective. And so, we always try to have someone with a lived experience as part of this webinar. And today, I also serve in that role as someone with lived experience. And so, I guess my question for you is, as I have been going through this transition, like I mentioned, there was nothing in my medical training that I think, helped to support me as I was experiencing these different things in my body and in my mood. I guess, what are some early signs that women should be on the lookout for that then prompts them? So for me, I waited an entire year. I kept thinking, I'm just too busy. I need to, I just kept trying to problem solve or troubleshoot for myself, thinking like I'm working too much. I'm not sleeping. I need to do a better job of this. I need to do a better job. And I think for women, we often are take the burden on ourselves and say, there's something that I'm doing wrong and let me try to fix it. So I spent a year spinning my wheels trying to fix what was happening to me before finally finding a physician who specializes in women's health who has helped me tremendously. And so I lost a year of life, of quality of life, trying to figure this out on my own. What are some early things that you can share with our audience so that women don't waste a year of their life trying to figure it out? What are some early on symptoms, signs that it's probably time to find someone who can offer some support?
Well, I can jump in. I think the first thing I think of is exactly what you were saying. It's like, don't wait. Give yourself permission to ask for help. And I think that's hard. And a lot of women, I think, feel much like you talked about, Dr. Moore, that it's that sense of, it's my job to be the everyone person in the house, and I have to take care of everything, and I'm the one that makes sure everybody's okay. And so when I'm not okay, I'm going to ignore that because I don't have time. It can't be true. I'm fine. I'll be better tomorrow. And then time keeps going and going and going. And then things just keep piling up. And so I think recognizing signals and what are those precursors of I'm not okay. being aware of those, I think, is very important in this period of time, and recognizing what's my threshold of I'm beyond okay, and giving yourself permission to go talk to somebody and get some help and to get some support, rather than feeling like you have to take this all on yourself and carry it around and be miserable. You don't. And I think for many of us, it's hard to take that step, because we do feel like we should be able to do it all and take it all. And so I think probably one of the biggest pieces is allowing yourself to do that. When you start to feel like things aren't on a daily basis, they're not running as they should, and things don't seem like they're the same. Something's different. That general sense of I'm unhappy, I'm stressed, I'm irritable, whatever that looks like for you, rather than just blowing it off, listen to that and go get some help.
I would say for me and my recommendations would be, I think for sure we all feel, some sort of guilt, either about taking time. I think for a lot of people that don't know much about perimenopause, they're waiting for their periods to become irregular or them to have hot flashes, those classic symptoms that may not come until later. Yet you're dealing with issues with, insomnia, you have poor sleep quality, which has such a huge ripple effect on so many other things. Resiliency, brain fog just becomes huge issues that I always tell my patients, you're going to have especially mom guilt about something. Okay. So let that go, figure out how you can make space for self-care before it gets to the point where it's hugely impacting your life. And then just that realization too, that yes, ChatGPT, Google, social media are great. And even though I practice functional medicine, which is very much supplement heavy, you can't supplement your way out of no estrogen, no progesterone, little to no testosterone. There's some natural things you can do to help support metabolism of those, but really get educated on how hormone replacement therapy maybe can honestly change your life.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have a question in the chat, for Dr. Z. So, is there someone gathering data on the negative impact of not covering menopause on corporations and business?
Yeah, actually, Stanford University had a very large study 3-4 years ago, and they're continuing that data collection. And so they're the major group that's been doing it. Several industries I know have started to look at that. I could provide that information later, but and I like your point about saving money by being preventative in your healthcare plans. And that's where I'm sensing looking at industry really needs to go. They need to realize the lost hours. I forget the numbers, but the expenditure for perimenopausal women for drugs is so much higher than the non-menopausal, and many of them are misdirected, so the statin uses, etc. And if you're an insurance carrier paying for all this, somebody in that company needs to ask exactly what you mentioned about the in vitro model. Maybe we need to look at this from the other side. Maybe if we start to give wellness care, that we're not going to be doing all these things related to statins and antidepressants and things like that. So, that kind of movement needs to be led. Thank you for mentioning BP for this program, because that's the kind of insight an industry needs to look at and say, let's explore it. We can be wrong in our exploration process, but I think it's pretty ripe in time to be able to say, this is a good movement that's going to help industry and help the person and in turn help society.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'd certainly love more information about this data. And if you have relationships with researchers at Stanford, we'd love to be connected with them, because it's certainly something that we are trying to have conversation with employers about. So that's just fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, we have a few more minutes, and I'll check the chat to see if anyone else has dropped any questions. We always try to improve and get feedback on these webinars. So please, if you could fill out the survey and give us feedback about your time with us today. We certainly appreciate the time of all our panelists, Dr. Perot, Dr. Z, Dr. Nelson. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us, your wisdom. It's really been a delight. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I love it.
Yes, thank you.
It's been wonderful. So on behalf of our panelists and organizers, thank you all for being a part of this really important dialogue. Together, we can continue to ensure that women's voices and that the needs of our health needs are being prioritized. So let's just keep the momentum going. Everyone have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll see you next month's webinar, which Dr. Nelson, you'll be happy to hear about. It's about integrated healthcare.
I saw that. Yeah.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Dr. Moore.
you.
Bye, Dr. Z. Bye, Dr. Nelson.
Bye.
Bye.
Gracias por haber estado aquí en el show Catching Up with Claudia. ¿Tan tan? ¿Ya terminamos? Ok, bye.